Lonely CEO entered his own restaurant as a homeless man. Only the young waitress saved him a seat. The first thing Julian Mercer noticed was the warmth. From across the rain-slicked street, Marrow and Finch glowed like a promise. Golden light spilled through its tall windows onto the Chicago sidewalk. Inside, waiters moved between linen-covered tables with the quiet precision of dancers. Crystal glasses caught the light. Couples leaned close over anniversary dinners. Businessmen laughed over bottles of wine expensive enough to cover a month of rent for someone else. It was the most successful restaurant in the Mercer table group. It was also, Julian had begun to fear, the coldest. He stood under the awning of a closed boutique, dressed in a stained army green coat 2 sizes too large, a gray knit cap pulled low over his forehead, and a fake beard that itched every time rain touched it. In one hand he held a torn paper bag, in the other a few damp bills. No one looking at him would see Julian Mercer, CEO of a national restaurant empire. That was the point. 2 days earlier, a letter had arrived at his private office with no return address. Only one sentence had been written across the page. Your restaurants don't feed people anymore. They judge them. Julian had nearly thrown it away. Anonymous complaints came with success. Disappointed guests, bitter ex-employees, competitors pretending to be moral philosophers. But something about that sentence stayed with him. Maybe because his father, who had opened the first Mercer diner 40 years ago, used to say the opposite. A restaurant is a place where people are allowed to sit down before the world decides what they are worth. Julian had built on that legacy until it became polished, profitable, and nationally admired. Now he wanted to prove the letter wrong. He crossed the street. The hostess looked up as he entered. Her smile appeared first, then vanished so quickly it seemed trained to retreat. Rainwater dripped from Julian's coat onto the marble floor. "I'd like a table," he said, keeping his voice rough and low. The hostess glanced past him, as if hoping he had arrived with someone more appropriate. "I'm sorry, sir. We're fully committed tonight." Behind her, at least 4 tables sat empty. Julian looked toward them. She followed his gaze and tightened her grip on the reservation tablet. "Those are held for confirmed guests. I can pay." The words sounded humiliating even though he had scripted them. A bartender nearby heard and laughed under his breath. Not loudly, just enough for Julian to feel it. The hostess lowered her voice. "Sir, this may not be the right establishment for you." That sentence did something strange to him. He had heard versions of it before from landlords, private clubs, investors, people guarding invisible doors, but never in a building he owned. Before Julian could answer, a man in a charcoal suit approached with the smooth irritation of someone trained to remove discomfort before guests noticed it. Graham Pierce, general manager, strong numbers, excellent reviews, one of the executive's favorites. Julian had approved his bonus last quarter. Now Graham looked him over and saw only a problem near the entrance. "Is there an issue here?" The hostess leaned toward him. "He wants a table." Graham did not ask Julian's name. He did not ask whether he had a reservation. He did not ask if he was hungry. He smiled the kind of smile that kept its hands clean. "Sir, we're not able to accommodate you tonight." Julian held up the damp bills. "I just want something hot. Soup. Bread. Whatever this covers." Graham's eyes flicked to the money, then away. "Our menu may be outside your budget." The bartender laughed again. This time, a couple waiting for their coats turned to look. The woman's expression tightened with discomfort, not compassion. A man near the bar lifted his phone, perhaps to record, perhaps only to pretend he was not watching. Julian felt himself being moved toward the door without anyone touching him. A human inconvenience. A stain on the experience. Near the dining room entrance, Nora Hayes stopped with a tray of water glasses balanced on one hand. She was 24, though exhaustion had sharpened her face into something older. A loose strand of dark hair had fallen from her bun. Her white shirt was clean but fraying at one cuff. In her apron pocket, her phone buzzed again and again. She already knew what the messages said. Leo's medication was running low. The landlord wanted payment by Friday. And Graham had warned her less than an hour earlier that she was too generous with people who don't improve the check average. Nora saw the man at the door. She saw Graham's hand hovering near his shoulder, not touching, but guiding him out through shame. She also saw the empty two-top beside the kitchen corridor, the worst table in the restaurant. Loud, cramped, half-hidden by a service station. But it was a table. Graham turned towards security. "Please escort him out." Nora stepped forward before fear could catch her. "Wait." Graham's eyes cut to her. She lowered the tray carefully onto the service stand. "Table 19 is open. That table is held for walk-ins." He walked in. The hostess looked down. Graham's voice chilled. Appropriate walk-ins. Nora felt every dollar she needed pressing against her ribs. Rent, medicine, bus fare, groceries. Leo pretending he was fine so she would not worry. She should have stepped back. Instead, she looked at the man in the wet coat. "If someone comes through the door hungry," she said, "he's a guest." The entrance area went silent. Not the whole restaurant. Just the people close enough to understand that something improper had happened. Not the arrival of a homeless man, but a waitress refusing to treat him like garbage. Graham leaned closer. "You are putting your job at risk." Nora's stomach dropped, but she lifted her chin. "Then I guess I'm doing it at table 19. For a second Julian forgot the beard, the coat, the role. He stared at her, stunned by the simple courage of someone who had far more to lose than he did in that moment. Nora picked up a menu and walked to the small table near the kitchen doors. She pulled out the chair. It scraped loudly against the floor. A few guests turned. Nora ignored them. Julian sat. From that table he could see the swinging doors, the stacked trays, the service station, the polished dining room, pretending nothing had happened. Nora placed a glass in front of him, then returned with water from the coffee station. Not ice water in crystal. Warm water in a plain glass. She set it down gently. "It's not much," she said under her breath, "but it's a seat." Julian wrapped both hands around the glass. For years he had measured his restaurants by revenue, expansion, reviews, and awards. But sitting at the worst table in the best restaurant he owned, warmed by a glass of water a waitress had risked her job to bring him, Julian Mercer felt something he had not expected. Nora did not treat him kindly in a way that made a performance of kindness. That was the first thing Julian noticed. She did not crouch beside him with a tragic expression. She did not call him "sir" in that trembling voice people used when they wanted witnesses to their own compassion. She simply placed a menu in front of him, wiped a water ring from the table, and pointed to the left side of the page. "The soup is the cheapest thing that won't make you regret being alive." Julian looked down. Even the soup cost more than the damp bills in his pocket. "I only have a few dollars." Nora glanced toward Graham, who was watching from the hostess stand, with the expression of a man waiting for an employee to make one more mistake. Then she took the menu back. "Fine. I'll ask the kitchen if there's a small bowl left from family meal." "Family meal? What restaurants call feeding staff before they ask us to smile at people eating steak we can't afford?" Her tone was dry, almost sharp. Not sweet, not saintly. Julian found that more honest. A few minutes later, she returned with a shallow bowl of soup, 2 pieces of bread, and a napkin folded like he mattered. The soup was not from the menu. He knew that immediately. Too simple, too rustic. It smelled of onions, chicken stock, and the kind of economy no Michelin inspector ever praised. "The bread goes on my meal," she said before he could ask. "I didn't ask you to do that." "No, you asked for hot food. Try not to make me regret listening." She left before he could answer. From table 19, Julian could see more than any executive report had ever shown him. He saw a server limping slightly but smiling every time she passed a table. He saw a line cook pull off his glove and rub his wrist, only for the sous chef to snap that breaks were over. He saw Graham glide from VIP to VIP, voice warm as butter, then turn cold the instant he faced staff. Near the kitchen doors, a young dishwaier with an accent apologized for dropping a tray. Graham corrected his English before addressing the broken plates. Julian felt the soup turn heavy in his stomach. He had built systems to measure speed, cost, satisfaction, waste. He had dashboards that could tell him how long a table sat before dessert was offered. He knew which wines sold best in Denver, which entrees underperformed in Atlanta, which servers converted specials into higher checks. None of his reports measured humiliation. Nora came back with more warm water. "You stare a lot," she said. "I'm observing. People without reservations always observe. Michelin guests just complain with better vocabulary." He almost smiled. "You don't like this place?" "I like parts of it." She collected an empty bread plate from the next table. "The food is good. Some of the people are good. The chairs are uncomfortable enough to keep rich people humble, though it doesn't always work. Then why stay?" She looked at him as if he had asked something either very rude or very innocent. "Rent, medicine, the usual glamorous reasons." Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She ignored it once, then again. On the third vibration, she stepped near the service station and checked the screen. Whatever she read changed her face. Julian saw panic flash before she forced it down. She called someone in a low voice, turning her back to the dining room. He caught only fragments. "Leo, chest pain." "Did you take the pill?" "No." "Don't call 911 unless it gets worse. I'll be home after close." Her hand trembled as she put the phone away. When she returned to his table, he asked before he could stop himself, "Is someone sick?" Nora's eyes narrowed. "Homeless men are nosier than critics. I'm sorry, my brother." She refilled his water even though the glass was nearly full. "He's 16, heart thing. He says he's fine when he's not, because apparently teenage boys think lying is a medical plan. You should go, and pay for medicine with what?" My sparkling personality. The answer came too fast, too practiced. She had said some version of it to herself many times. Before Julian could respond, Graham appeared at her shoulder. "Nora, I have 3 tables. You have 2. This one is not a table." "It's a distraction." Julian lowered his eyes, staying in character, though something hot moved behind his ribs. Graham continued quietly. "Vivian Cross is arriving in 20 minutes with the investor group. If that table doesn't feel like royalty, you're done here." Nora's face went still. Vivian Cross, Julian's regional operations director, was indeed scheduled to meet investors tonight. He had approved it. He had not imagined the staff would be threatened into worship for it. Nora moved to the VIP table. She served them flawlessly. Julian watched her describe wine she would never drink, smile at jokes that were not funny, and carry plates heavy enough to make her wrist flex with strain. Each time she passed his table, she checked the soup level, the water, the bread, not hovering, just not forgetting. That was when one of the VIP guests noticed him. The man wore a navy suit and a watch that flashed whenever he lifted his glass. He leaned toward Graham, but not quietly enough. Is that part of the ambiance now? Graham's jaw tightened. The man continued, wrinkling his nose. I'm trying to enjoy dinner. The smell is distracting. Nora stopped mid-step. The dining room seemed to hawse around her. Graham approached table 19 with decision already in his eyes. Nora, he said, clear this table. Julian felt the moment sharpen. Nora stood between Graham, the VIP guest, and the man she believed had nowhere else to go. Her job was on one side, a stranger's dignity on the other. She looked at the VIP guest first. Her voice was calm. If a beautiful dinner can be ruined because you had to see a poor man eating soup, I don't think the problem is the soup. Several heads turned. Graham's face darkened. Nora, but she did not apologize. She picked up Julian's empty bowl slowly, not to remove him, but because he had finished eating. Then she placed the bread plate back in front of him, as if to say he was still allowed to exist there. The VIP guest scoffed. Graham leaned close to Nora, his voice low enough to appear professional and cruel enough for Julian to hear. Finish the shift, then clock out. You're suspended pending review. For 1 second, Nora's face cracked, not much. Only enough for Julian to see what the job meant. Rent, medicine. Leo at home pretending his chest did not hurt. Then she smoothed her expression. Yes, Mr. Pierce. Julian's hand tightened around the warm glass. He could end this now. Stand, remove the beard, say his name, watch Graham's face collapse. Give Nora her job back before the soup cooled. But the impulse stopped in his throat. Because if he rescued her with power, the story would become simple. Good waitress helps disguised CEO. Bad manager punished. Everyone claps, company issues a statement about values. And nothing deeper would change. Julian looked around his restaurant, at the staff swallowing exhaustion, the guests mistaking money for worth, the manager enforcing a cruelty that had been profitable enough to be rewarded. Nora was not being punished by one man. She was being punished by a system Julian had built and called excellence. He stayed seated, not because it was easy, because for the first time all night, he understood that shame was not enough. He would need evidence. He would need truth. And he would need to deserve the seat she had saved for him. Nora left through the back door just after midnight. The rain had not stopped. It fell in thin silver lines behind the restaurant, washing grease from the alley pavement and turning the cardboard boxes near the dumpster soft at the edges. Marrow and Finch still glowed beautifully from the front, but out here, behind the kitchen, it looked like any other business that produced trash after pretending to produce magic. Nora stood under the small metal awning, shoulders stiff, apron folded over one arm, suspended pending review. She had heard those words before in other forms. We'll call you. We're restructuring. You're too emotionally involved. You're a great worker, but great workers, she had learned, were very easy to let go. A voice came from near the alley wall. I wanted to thank you. She turned and saw the homeless man from table 19 standing in the rain, his old coat dark with water, hands tucked beneath his arms for warmth. For one exhausted second, Nora almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because if she did not laugh, she might sit down on the wet pavement and not get up. You don't need to thank me, she said. Thank you doesn't pay rent. He lowered his eyes. That made her feel cruel, which irritated her more. She had lost a job for letting him eat soup. Now she was feeling guilty for sounding tired about it. She started walking toward the bus stop. After half a block, she realized he was behind her. Nora spun around. Are you following me? No. I mean, but not like that. That is possibly the worst answer. He stopped in the rain, looking genuinely ashamed. You almost fell back there. I thought you might need. I need sleep. I need my brother's medication. I need managers to stop treating decency like theft. Her voice cracked at the edges. I do not need a strange man trailing me through an alley. He accepted the correction without argument. That more than anything softened her. The man was shivering, not dramatically, just enough that his hands shook when he tried to tuck them deeper into his sleeves. Nora sighed. There was a diner 2 blocks away, the kind with cracked booths, burnt coffee, and a waitress named Marge who called everyone honey with the same level of suspicion. Nora led him there and bought 2 coffees with the last of her tips. He held the paper cup like it was a fragile thing. Nora sat across from him, too tired to pretend she was not angry. He asked why she had risked her job. She stared into her coffee. Her father had owned a small neighborhood diner before medical bills swallowed it. He used to keep the last table open near closing, even when business was bad. If someone came in cold, hungry, embarrassed, or pretending not to be all three, he gave them soup first and asked questions later. Nora had grown up thinking that was what restaurants were. Then she started working in places where hospitality came with dress codes, credit cards, and managers who could smell poverty faster than burnt garlic. Her phone buzzed. "Leo," she answered immediately. Her 16-year-old brother said he was fine, too quickly. Nora heard the lie under his breathing. The chest pain had eased, he said. He had taken the pill. No, he did not need an ambulance. No, she should not panic. Nora closed her eyes. By the time she ended the call, her coffee had gone cold. "I have to go home," she said. The man walked with her, not close enough to crowd her, not far enough to seem indifferent. At her building, the front step had cracked down the middle. The hallway smelled of damp plaster and old cooking oil. A bulb flickered near the stairs. Leo opened the apartment door before she could knock. He was thin, pale, and smiling too brightly. Nora scolded him for being out of bed, then touched his forehead with the back of her hand. The gesture was automatic, intimate, practiced by someone who had been both sister and parent for too long. Inside, the apartment was small but carefully kept. A stack of medical forms sat beside a jar of coins. A pot of soup cooled on the stove. Nora counted pills on the table, checked the dosage label twice, and wrote numbers in a notebook with the same precision Julian had seen CFOs use on acquisition models. Then, as if this were nothing, she poured soup into a container. "For Mrs. Alvarez downstairs," she explained. "Her arthritis is bad when it rains." Julian stood in the doorway, still wearing his lie, and felt something inside him go quiet. Nora's kindness was not softness. It was not abundance. It was a tax she paid out of almost nothing. The next morning, Julian Mercer returned to his office in a charcoal suit. No beard, no torn coat, no paper bag. Vivian Cross was waiting in the conference room with the internal reports he had requested before dawn. She had known him long enough not to ask why he looked as though he had not slept. He told her what he had seen. Vivian did not look surprised. That angered him at first. Then she said what he least wanted to hear. Marrow and Finch was not an exception. Mercer Table rewarded managers for high check averages, reduced labor costs, premium guest satisfaction, and brand protection. No one's bonus depended on whether a cold man got soup. No one was promoted for giving dignity to someone who could not improve the quarterly numbers. Julian pushed back automatically. Vivian let him. Then she slid a folder across the table. His signature was on the policy revisions from 2 years ago. His approval had made cruelty efficient. Later, they reviewed security footage. Julian watched Graham refuse customers who looked poor, cut staff breaks, pressure kitchen workers to clock out before cleaning, and move cash tips into a service adjustment account that never reached employees. He watched Nora being cornered in the office and pushed to sign a written warning for over-engagement with non-revenue guests. His first instinct was clean and satisfying. Vivian stopped him before he could make the call. If Graham became the whole villain, Mercer Table would survive by pretending the rot had a single name. The company would apologize, sacrifice one manager, and continue rewarding the next Graham, who delivered excellent numbers with cleaner hands. Then Julian's phone lit up with a forwarded email. Nora Hayes had been terminated for unprofessional conduct toward a VIP guest. For several seconds, Julian did not move. The easy answer was to reveal himself, reinstate her, pay her bills, fix Leo's medication, offer a promotion, make it right before lunch. But now he understood the danger in that. His money could repair Nora's weak. It could not repay the years his company had spent teaching people like Graham to treat people like Nora as disposable. That evening, Julian went back to her building, still unsure how to tell the truth. Nora came down the stairs before he knocked, wearing a white blouse carefully ironed at the collar and carrying a folder with her resume inside. Her eyes were tired, but her hair was pinned neatly. She looked like someone preparing to be rejected professionally. "You again," she said. He swallowed. "I heard about your job." "Of course you did. Bad news has excellent service." She adjusted the folder under her arm. "I have an interview at a diner across town. You shouldn't have to start over because you did the right thing." Nora gave him a look that was almost kind, which made it worse. "People like us don't get rescued," she said. "We just get up earlier." Julian had no answer. For the first time in his life, money sat in his pocket like a useless language. And the debt he owed her had nothing to do with soup, rent, or a job. It had to do with the world he had built, and the kind of man he would have to become to change it. Nora returned to Marrow and Finch because the email said attendance was mandatory. That was the only reason. She had already been fired, or suspended, or separated pending review, which was the kind of phrase companies used when they wanted cruelty to sound like paperwork. The message from Mercer Table's HR department said there were matters regarding her employment that required clarification. Nora translated that easily enough. They wanted her signature on something. Maybe a statement saying she had acted unprofessionally. Maybe a promise not to discuss what happened with Graham, the VIP guest, or the man in the wet coat who had eaten soup at table 19. She arrived in her interview blouse, the one she had worn to the diner across town. It had a tiny loose thread near the collar. She tucked it under with her thumb before stepping inside. Marrow and Finch looked different in daylight, less magical. Without the golden dinner lighting and the glow of wine glasses, Nora could see the scratches in the floor, the fingerprints on the host stand, the tired faces of the staff gathered near the dining room. Everyone was there: servers, line cooks, dishwashers, bartenders, hosts, assistant manager. Vivian Cross stood near the bar with a tablet in her hand. Graham Pierce stood near the front, pale but smiling with the brittle confidence of a man who believed he could still control the room. Then Nora saw him. At the center of the dining room stood a man in a black suit. His hair was neatly combed, his jaw was clean. His posture belonged to boardrooms, not alleys, but Nora knew the eyes before her mind accepted the face. The homeless man from Table 19 was Julian Mercer, CEO of Mercer Table Group. The man whose name was printed on her pay stubs. The man whose restaurants had fired her for giving him soup. For a moment Nora could not breathe, then anger came in hot enough to steady her. She turned toward the exit. "Nora," Julian said. She stopped but did not turn around. He approached slowly, careful not to make the room feel smaller around her. "I owe you an apology." That made her laugh once, sharp and humorless. "You owe me more than that, I know." "No, I don't think you do." She turned then. "I bought coffee with tip money I needed. I told you about my brother. I let you see where I live. I defended you because I thought you were a man people had decided not to see." Her voice shook, but she did not lower it. "And all that time I was part of your little test." Every employee in the room went still. Julian did not defend himself. That almost made her angrier. "You turned my poverty into evidence," she said. "You turned my decency into a performance review I never agreed to take." The words landed visibly. He accepted them like they deserved room. "You're right," he said quietly. "And I am sorry." Nora looked away first because if she kept looking at him, she might believe the apology mattered too soon. Vivian stepped forward and called the meeting to order. Julian did not stand behind the bar or near the host stand. He stood in the middle of the dining room, exactly where everyone could see him, and no one could pretend he was speaking only to someone else. He began with Graham. The evidence was not vague: security footage, payroll records, tip discrepancies, edited timesheets, written warnings pushed onto employees who challenged customer discrimination, internal complaints that had disappeared before reaching regional review. The room changed as each detail was named. Some employees looked stunned. Others looked less surprised than tired. That told Julian something too. Graham's face hardened. He said Nora had violated service standards. He said Marrow and Finch served a premium clientele. He said brand experience required judgment. He said the staff understood that not everyone who walked in was truly a customer. Julian listened. Then he asked who had taught him that. Graham went silent. Because everyone knew the answer was not one policy or one memo. It was the bonuses, the reviews, the language of protecting ambiance, the praise for high check averages, the quiet promotions given to managers who kept expensive guests, comfortable and inconvenient people invisible. Julian could have made it clean. He could have said Graham had failed Mercer Table values. He could have fired him and let the company remain innocent around the edges. Instead, he looked at the employees. "Graham Pierce is terminated effective immediately," he said. But this did not begin or end with him. The room held its breath. Julian continued. He said Mercer Table had rewarded the wrong things for years. It had measured speed, luxury, guest spending, and brand protection, but not dignity. It had created a culture where a waitress could lose her job for giving a hungry man a seat. He did not say Nora had saved him. He did not make her the moral decoration of his redemption. An independent investigation across all Mercer Table locations, immediate repayment of withheld tips, review of illegal scheduling and unpaid labor, a company-wide minimum wage increase beyond legal requirements, a protected reporting line that bypassed local management, a written policy that anyone who entered hungry would be treated as a guest, regardless of appearance. Some employees cried quietly. Some looked afraid to hope. Nora stood near the door, arms folded, refusing to let the speech become enough. After the meeting, Julian approached her again. He started to offer her a position back. A better one, full pay, training track, benefits, whatever she needed, but she lifted a hand. "No," he stopped. "You don't get to fix my dignity with a new title." He lowered his eyes. Before he could answer, shouting rose outside. A local reporter had gotten the leak. Through the front windows, Nora saw a camera crew setting up on the sidewalk. Someone had already turned the story into a headline. CEO disguises himself as homeless man. Waitress shows him kindness. Julian's first instinct was to protect her. He signaled toward the back exit, but Nora looked at the cameras, then at the staff behind her. "No," she said. "I'll say something." Julian seemed ready to object, then caught himself. He opened the front door and stepped aside. Nora walked into the cold afternoon light. The reporter rushed toward her, eager for tears, gratitude, a perfect little clip about the poor waitress who changed a rich man's heart. Nora gave them none of that. She said she had not saved a CEO. She had served soup to a man who looked hungry. That should not have been extraordinary. she said. If people turn this into a fairy tale about one powerful man learning a lesson, they would forget the workers still punished every day for being human, at jobs that demanded smiles and punished mercy. She said a seat should not become news only when the person sitting in it turned out to be rich. The reporter had no easy follow-up. Behind her, Julian watched in silence. For the first time, he did not see Nora as an employee, or a witness, or even the woman whose kindness had shamed him awake. He saw someone brave enough to refuse the comforting version of the truth. When the cameras lowered, Julian offered to drive her home. Nora shook her head. She was still angry, still hurt, still unemployed by choice for now. Maybe one day she would believe his apology. Maybe one day she would see whether Mercer Table actually changed after the cameras left. But not today. She looked at him once before walking away. If you want to do right by me, she said, don't make me the story. Fix the place that made kindness dangerous. Then she left. Julian stood outside his own restaurant, surrounded by cameras, staff, rain, and the wreckage of his polished brand. For the first time, he understood that if love ever began between them, it would not begin with a reward. It would begin with restraint, with accountability, with becoming the kind of man who did not need to rescue Nora in order to respect her. A few months later, Mercer Table was not fixed, not completely. Companies did not grow a conscience overnight just because one CEO had finally been ashamed in public. Some managers resisted, some investors complained, some guests hated the new policy and wrote dramatic reviews about the decline of fine dining. Julian read every complaint. This time, he did not mistake discomfort for failure. Tips were now tracked transparently. Staff schedules included protected rest days. Several locations began offering a community table every evening. Workers who had been underpaid received checks with apology letters that did not ask them to be grateful. Mercer Table also launched a training program for people who had been shut out of restaurant work because they lacked the right clothes, the right address, or the right references. The press did not treat Julian like a hero. Some said he changed only because he was caught. He did not deny it. When Vivian Cross asked if that bothered him, Julian told her the truth. Being seen as good mattered less now than doing something good after being seen clearly. Nora did not return to Marrow and Finch, not at first. She took a job at a small diner where the coffee tasted burnt, but the owner knew every regular by name. At night, she began taking restaurant management classes. Leo's health stabilized. He teased her for buying textbooks thicker than his school novels, and she pretended not to be proud when he started gaining weight again. Julian emailed occasionally, never begging, just updates. Tip restitution completed in Denver. Protected reporting line active in all Chicago locations. Community table pilot approved. You were right about independent oversight. I'm listening. Nora read the emails. Sometimes she replied with one sentence. Sometimes she did not. Eventually, they met again through a project called The Last Seat. Mercer Table agreed to fund nightly hot meals for people without stable housing, but Nora insisted the program be managed by an independent community board. No glossy charity campaign, no smiling CEO posters, no turning hunger into branding. Julian agreed to every term. On opening night, he invited Nora to Marrow and Finch. He did not ask her to speak. He did not place cameras near her. He simply waited near the front window, where a small table had been set with a clean cloth, warm bread, and a handwritten card, reserved for someone who deserves to be seen. Nora looked at the table. It was not beside the kitchen doors anymore, not hidden near the service station. It stood where anyone entering could see it. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Julian said he used to think restaurants sold experiences. Nora looked at him. He corrected himself before she could. They should invite people to sit down. That almost made her smile. Almost. She asked if he still planned to disguise himself whenever he wanted the truth. Julian shook his head. I'm trying to learn how to enter a room as myself. This time Nora did smile. Then you can sit with me, she said. But you'd better tip properly. He laughed, softly, gratefully. They sat at the table together. Not as a CEO and a waitress. Not as a rich man and the woman who had shamed him into decency. Not as rescuer and rescued. Just two people sharing bread in a restaurant that had finally remembered why tables existed. And maybe that was the lesson. Kindness should not need a hidden camera, a disguise, or a wealthy man's secret test to matter. A person should not have to become important before being treated as human. Julian's love for Nora did not begin when he revealed who he was. It began when he understood that she had saved him a seat when she believed he was no one. And Nora's forgiveness did not begin when he offered her a better life. It began when he stopped offering rescue and started doing the harder thing, changing the room so no one else had to beg for a chair. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Julian after learning the truth? And have you ever seen a small act of kindness expose a much bigger problem?